the first bit of jazz theory you should learn. So let's watch that.
What is up, friends? It's Simon from pianopig.com, and today I wanted to explain to you what I think is the first bit of the...
By the way, I've never heard of this channel before, pianopig.com, but it's a pretty big channel, so I actually don't even know if the channel is only about jazz. I guess not, but maybe he made more videos about theory. I should really check it out. But this video came up when I just typed in beginner jazz theory. This video came up as one of the top recommended videos.
Theory you should learn when getting into the world of jazz. Don't let the word theory put you off though. It's actually surprisingly simple, and it will answer so many questions you may have had about theory. You'll be able to work out the key of a chord progression, you'll understand what people mean when they say play a 6-2-5-1, you'll be able to come up with your own chord progressions. All these cool and really useful things come.
It's funny that he says here you can come up with your own chord progressions. That of course is true once you understand how harmony works in a jazz context, because different music styles have different ways of using harmony. That's important to understand. It doesn't always work the same way. Like a 2-5-1, that's something that's really, I don't want to say only present in jazz, but mainly. Of course, there is 2-5-1s in other music styles, but not as much as you think. Very few examples of it, actually. So it is a bit deceiving to say you can come up with your own chord progressions, because that makes it seem like anything is possible. But again, responding to what I just said, if you want to write jazz harmony or something that sounds jazzy, you can't get away from 2-5-1s, dominant chains, the Christoph changes, turnarounds. So in that sense, you're not very free, right? You could go another direction completely and maybe take a look at like stuff that Herbie Hancock wrote, but that's not jazz in the sense that that's not what you probably are going to play during jam sessions or most gigs. And it's also not the tunes that are very easy to improvise on. If you have to play a song like Dolphin Dance, which is a Herbie Hancock tune, you actually need to sit down and work out what is possible to play on those changes, because it's so non-standard. But if you just get started with jazz theory and you want to write a tune, you probably will be stuck with maybe the 5 or 6 formulas that are there. So there's not much you can do to get away from that.
From functional harmony. And I'm going to break it down in a way that is really easy to understand. And this lesson you're about to watch is actually from my brand new course, Jazz Basics. This one is all about covering the fundamentals and filling in any...
That's interesting. Maybe we should take a look at that course. I don't know, probably not free. Of course, if it's a paid course, I cannot show that in a reaction. But if there's free videos of that, then yeah, I could do that.
Gaps you might have, preparing you to really get out there and start learning how to play jazz. If you want to get access to the full course, it's available now inside the Piano Pig Academy. It comes with a bunch of resource sheets, quizzes. I've really put a lot of work into this one, and I think you're going to enjoy it. If you're not already a member and you fancy getting stuck in with the full course, click the link in the description below and come and join us today. It would be awesome to see you on the inside. But enough of me talking, let's learn about functional harmony. So the first question I'm sure we all have, what is functional harmony? Functional harmony, or you might also hear it be called diatonic harmony, is a way of thinking about the...
Yeah, diatonic harmony, that's a term that I don't hear a lot, but it's correct. Right? Functional harmony, diatonic harmony is probably synonyms. Diatonic literally means according to the scale, right? Or you use chords that can be made with a scale. Now, probably or definitely if you talk about functional harmony, you're talking about 2 very specific scales, namely in major, the major scale, and in minor, the harmonic minor scale. If you take a Dorian scale, then you're not actually talking about functional harmony anymore, just for the fact that there is no real dominant chord in a Dorian scale. So to have really functional harmony, you need that 5-1 progression or 4-1 progression. In a Dorian tune, it's not really there if you only use Dorian chords. So I wonder if you could call a tune that only has Dorian chords a diatonic harmony, because you're still using chords only made by the scale. I'm not sure. So maybe diatonic scale or diatonic harmony and functional harmony are not completely synonyms. I have to look it up. It's interesting. I would actually never say diatonic harmony because of this thing. I would always say functional harmony. And with that, I mean practically that there is this 5-1 tension and 4-1 tension. So the difference between 5-1 and 4-1 is that in the 4 chord in a tune, the 4 chord also has the root of the 1 chord in it. So if we're in C, right, so the 4 chord would be F, and the F has the C in it, right? So if you go from an F chord to a C chord, that C is present in both chords. So the only thing that changes is this F going to an E for C. Now, if you have the 5 chord, G7, or G, let's take G, then there is no C in it, right? So now we have a resolution from a B in the G chord to a C. So we go from a note in the G chord to the root of the 1 chord. That's a very strong resolution. That's why that 5-1 is so much more feeling that you have to resolve, because the 4 chord already has the root of the 1 chord in it. That also means that practically the most beauty in harmony comes actually from 4 to 1 and not from 5 to 1, because the 5 to 1 is so obvious. Okay.
Purpose of chords and harmony. It's a method of assigning labels and numbers to chords. Let's take a C major scale, for instance. We can actually build a chord from each note of that scale. And not only that, we can build a 7th chord from each of those notes. So how do we do that? Well, let's start by building a 7th chord off the first note, C. We play a C, and then we skip the next note of the C major scale. But we add the following note into the chord. And then we do the same again. Skip the next note, and add the following note into the chord. And again, skip, add. And we can't continue this because then we're back to C.
Okay, so I like the way he shows this, but I'm not completely sure this is accurate. If we talk pure in theory, the established way of talking about chords, like that has been established by theory people, or what do you call it, theory experts, theoreticians. So I'm not saying that what they say is how music works, right? Because that's not how it developed. There was music that sounded good and people start studying it, and then they come up with a theory behind it. But if we talk definitionally, then I think the real, you see, those words might not be correct, but let's say the most used definition of a chord would be stacked thirds. So that's what he's doing here, right? He's a note, he's skipping one note in the scale, and then there's non-note, and that interval is a third. So if you stack thirds, you get a chord. And you need to at least stack 2, because if you only stack 1, so you have 2 notes, that's not really a chord, that's an interval or a double stop, something like that. So you need at least 3 notes. Now it is possible, of course, once you have 4 notes, to say, okay, I'm not going to play that G in this chord, I'm just going to play C, E, B. And then you still get the sound of a C major 7, but you're just omitting the 5th. So let's say you have a score, there's a C, somebody sings a C and somebody sings E, like 2 octaves higher, and somebody sings B, another octave higher. If you can reduce that to thirds, then you have a chord. Now in this case, you can't really reduce to thirds because you get a C, E, and then a gap and a B. But if you can fill in a third between 2 notes that don't have a third between them, then you still have a chord. That would be the definition of a chord. So in that sense, that's missing from this information. But another thing is that he's saying now that you cannot continue because it needs to be in 1 octave. But that is not true, obviously, because in jazz, you also go beyond the 7. You use a 9, use an 11, use a 13. As long as you keep stacking thirds, you have a chord. So from a B, we could go to a D. from the D we could go to an F. That would be a weird chord, of course. That would be like a C major 11. That doesn't really sound great, so nobody's using it. And but we could also go to an F sharp, and then we have a sharp 11. And we could go to an A, that we have the 13. If we go a third beyond that, we go back to a C. So there it stops. On that A or A flat, any third could work, it stops. So that's really how you build chords. I don't think saying that you should stop at the B is correct, because now you miss the essential information of stacking thirds.
And the chord has to stay within 1 octave. So we're left with this. And this is the chord that is built off the first note of the scale. And if we want to repeat that same process that we've just been through for each note of the C major scale, we would get these chords.
Yeah, so
all of the notes...
These are just all, as you can see here, they're all stacked thirds. If you don't read notes, you can also recognize stacked thirds by all notes being visually the same way, right? Either they're on a line or they're between lines. As you can see, the D minor 7, the notes are all between lines. Like the bottom note, of course, doesn't have a line below it, but still, you could imagine there would be a line below it. And the E minor 7, all the notes are on the lines. That's how you recognize a third, if they're stacked like that. So all of these chords are stacked thirds. And in C, obviously, those are all the white keys. And what you get then, I'm not sure he's going to say that, but I'm going to say it now. Maybe he will say it later. What you get is a major 7 on the first and fourth degree. So in C would be C major 7, F major 7. You get a minor 7 chord on the second, third, and sixth degree. So D minor 7, E minor 7, and A minor 7. And you get a half diminished chord on the seventh degree, B half diminished. Now you think, well, that's a lot of chords to remember. And that might be the case, especially when you go to 12 keys. But it's very, very, very important to realize, and that's not, I don't hear this enough in jazz educational videos, that even though we have 7 degrees here, functionally, we only have 3. We have the first degree, that's 1. We have the fourth degree, or we have C major 7, that's 1. We have F major 7, that's 4. And we have G7, that's 5. All the other degrees are just variations of one of those 3. For example, the second degree is a variation of the fourth degree. And you can also see that because in the F major 7, I could put a note under that F, and then I would have a D minor 7 with a 9, right? The E would be a 9. So 2 and 4 are functionally the same chord. You can also tell that by the fact that they both have the root of the key in it, both have a C in it. And like I said earlier, if you have an F chord resolving to a C, 4 to 1, that C is stays. And the same would if I would resolve from a D minor 7 to a C, that C stays. So 2 and 4 are the same function. Now 3 and 6 are the same function as 1. And again, you can see that because the third degree, if we put a note under the E, we have a C major 7, 9. On the sixth degree, if we take away the lowest note, we would have just a C major triad. And if we, let's say, put that A on top, we would have a C6. Now C6 is a kind of weird chord because it's not stacked thirds, right? It's 2/3 plus a second, but it's still a chord. Some people would actually say, no, what? A C6 is just an inversion of A minor 7, which technically probably true. But here you can see that like theory sometimes doesn't work because I would never think of C6 as some kind of A minor 7 chord. But you can see here that those 3 chords, they sound very similar. So what does that mean for you as a jazz musician? It means that when you play a solo on a tune that's in C and you see an A minor 7 chord, you should play just the same things that you would play on C. And it has big implications. For instance, a C major scale has an F in it, right? It works great on a C major. But on A minor, you would not maybe play that on first sight. You would not play that scale because you might be thinking, you know what, I should play maybe with some kind of F sharp sound. And that is possible, don't get me wrong. But it's important to not to think of that chord as A minor 7, but just to think of it as 1, as C. Same goes for E minor. If you have a tune in C that has an E minor chord in it, it's just 1. And a good example would be a 1-6-2-5 progression. So 1-6-2-5 in C would be C, A minor, D minor, G7. What do you play on that? Well, the two first chords, C and A minor, like I said, with 1 and 6 is just 1. So you just play the same things as you would play on C. Just so that functionally, that bar is all C. And then 2 and 5, well, we'll get to that later. Another example would be 3-6-2-5. So 3, 6, 2, 5. 3 is the same as 1. So this would actually be 1, 6. 6 is the same as 1. So that's all C. This is all C. And now we get 2, 5. We'll talk about 2, 5 later. So now you can see, so many chords, E minor 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7. No, that just means C, first bar, and then the second bar is a 2, 5. And as jazz musicians, we have different ways of approaching 2, 5s. But even though you can see we have those 7 chords, it's basically just 3 chords. We didn't talk about the 7th chord, the B half diminished. Practically it's not used in jazz. A B half diminished in the key of C is not really used. We could use it, but a better alternative to that chord would be just G7. So you can see if I put a note under the B half diminished, we just have a G9. So nobody's using that B half diminished chord. I can't think of a single example of a tune in a major key where the 7th chord is used instead of the 5th chord, instead of the 5.
Notes in every single one of those chords belong within the C major scale. And those chords are C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G dominant 7.
If you're a jazz musician, never say G dominant 7. I have so many students that keep saying that, and I say, don't say that, because you don't sound like you have experience playing jazz, because nobody's saying that. Like, no experienced jazz musician is ever going to say, guys, the chord here is A dominant 7. They just say A7. And I know why people are saying A dominant 7. That's because in classical music, they don't use, well, I think nowadays they might use it, but it used to be that you wouldn't say A7 because it wouldn't be clear if you mean the minor 7 or the major 7. In fact, if you don't specify, it's always major 7. So if I say, that's the rule in classical music, right? If I say C6, I mean the major 6. I don't mean the minor 6th. So if I say 7 for classical musicians, I don't think nowadays anymore, but let's say maybe 20 years ago, they would assume it's the major 7. But so G7, that is actually G major 7. So that to make it clear that we talk about the dominant chord, we say G dominant 7. But in jazz, we just say 7. So please don't go around saying G dominant 7. Nobody says that. G7, and if you want major 7, then say G major 7.
A minor 7, B minor 7 flat 5.
Also, nobody says that. I understand that's the correct name, but everybody would just say half diminished.
And then we're just back to our C major 7. And what we can do now is number these chords from 1 to 7. And that now gives us a numbering system. So we would have chord 1, chord 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and chord 7.
So to reiterate, 1, 3, and 6 are the same chord. They're all 1. 2 and 4 are the same chord. They're just 4. We think of it as the 4 chord. And 5 and 7 are the same chord. It's just 5, but 7 is never used.
And something to take note of is that when you see these Roman numerals in music, we tend to use uppercase for major chords and lowercase for minor chords.
Also true, I prefer just using numbers, just like 1, 2, like normal numbers. It just looks better on TikTok. It just looks better in shorts on Instagram to just use normal numbers. And I see more and more people do it. And I like it. It gives me it gives the identity to. It gives me more of a jazz feel, right? Like this Roman numeral systems with the small numerals, and then you just get the I. It looks weird anyway. So I still do it in my books because I realize that some people just want to see that kind of system. But to be honest, I would prefer if we would just start using numbers. Just I think let's get away from this very old-fashioned way of writing things down with Roman numerals and like capital, small letters. Like if we in C major, the 2 chords are always minor, and if it's not minor, it's a dominant chord, and then we would just say it's a 2 chord, but it's a dominant or something, or it's a 7 chord, or it's a D7. So just use numbers 1, 2, 3. I would say.
Now, I'm sure you've probably come across terminology such as a 2-5-1, and you're probably thinking, aha, that's where the numbers come from. And you're right. A 2-5-1 would literally be a case of taking chord 2, D minor 7, chord 5, G dominant 7, and chord 1, C major 7.
Notice that he's playing every chord in the root position. And of course, I know why he's doing that, because that's the way it's on screen and it makes it more clear. But realize that in practice, of course, if you play jazz, you would never play every chord in root position. That means you play it with, like it's written on screen, where you just move your hand to the new chord. You would always try to create some interesting voicings by rearranging the order of the notes, which you can do, which you should do. And of course, on guitar, that's what we do naturally. If we play D minor 7 and we play G7, I'm not doing, right? I would not do that. It doesn't sound nice. I want to stay in this region of the guitar. That is actually voice leaning, but without strict rules. And then like C major, C6 or C major, or C major 9. So I understand, of course, why he's showing it like this, but it doesn't sound very jazzy. So let's say you don't know anything about jazz. You watch this like, wow, I didn't know jazz chords work like this, but it doesn't sound very jazzy to me. Well, that's because he's playing everything without any extensions, without any 9 or 13, and in root position.
So now when you hear people say things such as play a 1-6-2-5 in the key of C major, you'll actually know what they are talking about. But here's the even cooler part. I imagine some of you are thinking, well, that's all very good. I understand that those are the chords within the key of C major, but what happens when we change key? Because you might be thinking, well, there are 7 chords I need to remember for the key of C major, but there are 12 keys. So does that mean I need to somehow remember 84 different chords? And that is a very valid question. And thankfully, the answer to that question is no. You do not need to remember 84 different chords. And this...
You kind of do. You kind of do need to remember 84 different chords. Let's say if you want to learn this stuff by heart, you need to remember 84 different chords, but with a system. So maybe he's going to say that. But what you need to realize is, okay, 1st and 4th degree are major 7. 2nd, 3rd, and 6th degree are minor 7. 5th degree is 7. And 7th degree is half diminished. Then you need to know all major scales, all the notes in it. If you want to learn this, I'm not saying you should learn this. But if you want to learn this, then you should learn all major scales, and then you know them, what the notes are in it, and then you can calculate all degrees. So if I'm in the key of D flat, and I know the 6th note of the D flat scale is B flat, then I know that the 6th degree in D flat is B flat minus 7 because the 6th degree is minus 7. Now you can see here the problem a little bit already. Like, is it worth learning all of that? I don't think so. I don't think it's worth learning all of this. And that's why this would not be my first video I would make on jazz theory. Although there's nothing wrong with this video and I understand completely why it's made. But if my first video would just be showing you 2-5-1s, because the most important thing to learn by heart, and I tell this to every student I have that has trouble memorizing tunes or get lost in changes, memorize 2-5-1s, not by calculating, but by sentences. So it's the same as learning the tables of calculation. Is that the name you say in English? I don't know, in the Dutch, that's what we would say. Vermenigvuldigingstafel. So multiplication tables. Maybe that's the name. Multiplication tables is, I'm going to say that word again in case I want to make it short. Multiplication tables is something that you learn as a child. And so if they still do that, but I had to learn it. And we had to say them as sentences without calculation. So we would say 6 times 6 is 36. Right? I'm not calculating 6 times 6. I just know these words. I say these words 6 times 6 is 36. It's like a heuristic, right? 9 times 8 is 72. So you should learn 2-5-1s like that. So when I say 2-5-1 A flat, you're not going 2 chords. So let's see, the B flat's the second note, and that would be -7. So B flat -7. No, you have to say B flat -7, E flat 7, A flat. That's how you should learn the 2-5-1s. And then you should just take a walk outside, and if you can, then mention them in order of the circle of fourths. So let's say we start in C. So the first key would be C, then F, then B flat, E flat. Okay, start in C. So we say D -7, G7, C. G -7, C7, F. C -7, F7, B flat. Now you will see it's much harder than you think if you've never done it, but it's easier than you think if you start doing it and you fail. Because the only thing you need to do is just memorize these 2-5-1s as sentences. I would say learn 4 in a week, and then you have 12 in 3 weeks. So keep repeating them, and I think from a 0 level in 3 months, you should be able to do this like without thinking, just as a second nature. And this will help you so much with everything you need to do in jazz. Especially when you talk about songs, when you have to remember tunes, when you have to learn a new tune, when you get a sheet, you recognize all these 2-5-1s immediately, and stuff will get so much easier in that department. Not in the actual playing of a solo, but, well, even that will get a little bit easier. So learn that, 2-5-1s. And then the next step, I would say learn the circle of fourths.
This is the cool bit I mentioned earlier. If we get rid of the first part of these chords, we're left with this. And if we then put in their place the notes of a G major scale, for example, we would write G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, the notes of the G major scale. And this then leaves us with the actual chords within the key of G major. And something very, very important to notice is that the chord type of each number doesn't change. It's only the chords that change. So chord 1 is always a major 7. Chord 2 is always a minor 7.
That's what I was saying.
Chord 3 is always a minor 7. Chord 4 is always a major 7. Chord 5 is always a dominant 7. Chord 6 is always...
Don't say dominant 7, just say 7.
...is a minor 7. And chord 7 is always a minor 7 flat 5.
No, just say half diminished. I'm just making that point again. I know why he's saying it, but if you are a jazz musician, say 7 and say half diminished.
That system there, that major, minor, minor, major, dominant, minor, minor 7 flat 5, never changes. No matter what key you're in, it's always the same. And understanding this concept is huge, because it means that if you know your major scales and you remember this system, you can easily work out any chord within any key just from a number.
Yeah, that is true. But again, I don't think that is what you should be able to do. If you want to learn this, I would say you should also learn it as sentences. You should just know each degree in each key. But this is like a monumental task, because then you have to learn without seeing an instrument, right, by heart, all major scales. That's already a lot of work, because then you have to realize, okay, how many flats, how many sharps in each key. I would suggest an easier way is just to learn the intervals. If you want to do that, let's say you want to do that. I have done that because I had to. I was on the university and we had to learn these things. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have done it. Just learn the intervals of each major scale instead of the flats and the sharps. So learn, okay, from the first note to the second note is a whole step. Then it's a whole step again. Then it's a half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So there's 2 half steps from the third to the fourth note and from the seventh note back to the first note. And then it's easier to calculate. Then you learn also all intervals relating to the first degree. So from the first to the sixth note in the scale, major scale, is a major sixth, right? From the first note to the fourth note is a perfect fourth. So in that way, you don't have to memorize all major scales, but you can just memorize the intervals. So if you're in the key of E flat, and you have to calculate the fourth degree, then you know, okay, fourth degree, that's a perfect fourth, so it's A flat, and the fourth degree is also always major 7, so it's A flat major 7, like that. But I wouldn't even do that. I would just learn those 2 5/1s and the circle of fourths. And then if you want to go a step beyond that, then also learn the 1 6 2 5s. And if you want to go a step beyond that, then also learn Christoph changes. And I think once you know all of those things, you can remember practically any functional harmony tune or tonal tune within, I would say, 5 minutes. If it's really easy, like if there's not a lot happening, then I could learn the tune probably within 30 seconds. But if it's very complicated, let's say like Ergin, which has a lot of different modulations, that would take me a little longer. That maybe take me like 10 minutes of looking at it, playing it a couple of times. But most tunes I could learn within 1 minute. It's just you put it in front of my face, I play one chorus rhythm, and then I look maybe one more chorus, and then I know it. Now, I won't remember it forever, because, of course, if I'm not playing it again, that tune, then the next time I play the tune, maybe a year later, I need to look at it again. But then it will again take me only 30 seconds. So you have to put a lot of work in beforehand, preloading, right? You preload the knowledge, the 2 5/1s, the Christoph changes, the dominant chains, the turnarounds. But once you've done that, then the rest of your life, you can learn any tune within 5 minutes. I'm talking about the chords, you're not about the themes, the chords, right? But that's a great skill to have. Very valuable if you're a gigging musician or if you play with a lot of different groups that change the repertoire. Like when you play with the Rosenberg Trio, I remember my first year with the Rosenberg Trio was a very tough year because I wasn't at a level that I was actually capable of or even deserving of doing it, but that just happened that way because of our agencies and stuff. And also other reasons that I was also part of that group to make it a good theater show and stuff. Well, that doesn't really matter, but I remember like the Rosenberg Trio doesn't really rehearse in a traditional way like most groups would rehearse. They just know all the tunes already. So they would only rehearse if there's something new. And usually there's not much new. They just have a huge repertoire. And you were just expected to know all these tunes. So often, of course, I didn't know the tunes. They would also change repertoire for gigs. I wouldn't know a lot of the tunes, and I had to learn them very quickly. Now, luckily, I was already capable of doing this before I started playing with the Rosenberg Trio. But I can imagine if I wouldn't be capable of doing that, and then I also was struggling with the tempos that they were using and just the speed of everything, then probably I would have stopped after 1 year. So I was very happy I was able to do that, at least.
For example, if someone said to you, play chord 6 in E major, all we'd have to do...
Let's calculate it. Chord 6 in E major, right? The sixth note in E major is a major 6, so it's a C sharp, because that's a major 6 interval. And the sixth chord is always -7, so it's C sharp -7.
Is get our numbered chordal system, put the notes of E major in front of them, and we can clearly see that chord 6...
Look at that, I was right. Wow.
6 would be a C sharp minor.
People are going to say, oh, you pre-watched the video. I didn't. Okay, I'm joking, because it's very easy to do, but that's the way you do it. You don't think about the whole scale, you just think about the interval and the chord type.
7. And if we analyze this even further, we can see that all the notes of C sharp -7 are present within the E major scale. And the same would be true for any of those chords. Let's do another little quiz. If we were given this chord progression and we were told it was in the key of A major, how would we number the chords?
Okay, A major, right? So it's 3, but C sharp, because it's a third. Then we would have a 6, right? Because it's the 6th note of the A major scale. Then we have 2, 5, 1. Now, even though I know this stuff called, I look at this chord progression, I still have to think about the first two. Why? Well, first of all, this chord progression is very unusual. 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. I talked about it earlier, but you don't see it a lot. So it's not something that I see daily, like, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. But also, because I've drilled those 2, 5, 1s so much, I see B minor 7, E7, A major. I don't even have to think about it. It's just 2, 5, 1. I know that. The first two chords, then I have to, of course, 3, 6. And to get back to the information I gave earlier, 3 and 6, functionally, or for improv purposes, is the same as 1. So if I would have to solo over these chords, I'd just be thinking A major, 2 bars, 2, 5, right, like that. So it's actually very easy to solo over. I would not think about C sharp minor 7 or F sharp minor 7 in any other way than just A major.
We would start by writing out all the chords within A major and labeling them. And from there, it should just be a matter of matching them up. So here are the numbered 7th chords within A major. And we can clearly see that this progression is a 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. So what I want you to do now is download the quiz worksheet from below and try to label all the chords. There's a variety of different progressions in different keys, and once you've filled them all out, you can download the answer sheet to check your answers. Let us know in the community if you get stuck, and also how well you do in the quiz. I'd love to know. So congratulations.
That could be interesting. I will link the video in this video in the description once this video goes on YouTube, and then you could try that. But again, I'd say it's a little bit too much work to do that. And you don't really need it. You don't really need to know all of the information in this video, even though it's very basic. But that's actually the problem. It's very basic information. It can still take you a long time to internalize it or memorize it or learn it in some way. But then you wouldn't use most of it, because in the end you'll just be playing on 2, 5, 1s. Right, and dominant chains. You wouldn't not really play on 3, 6, or on 7. Let's say you want to learn all half diminished chords in all keys, which is pretty easy because you just go a half step down from the 1. So if we're in the key of G flat, then it's F half diminished. But F half diminished is never going to be used in a key in a song in G flat. It's not. I can't think of a single song that has a half diminished chord used in that way. It's used in other ways, but not in that way. So it's a lot of work, probably, for not a lot of usability.
Congratulations, you've just learnt one of the most important and useful bits of jazz theory.
That is debatable. I don't think that's true. What would be, according to me, the most useful bit of jazz theory? 2, 5, 1s, yeah. It's just knowing how they work, what you can play on them, how they can be substituted, how in the different forms they appear, right? Long 2, 5, 1, short 2, 5, 1. So everything that has to do with the 2, 5, 1 would, for me, be the most important thing about jazz theory.
You've learnt it, you'll notice it cropping up everywhere, and hopefully you'll be able to answer quite a few other theory-related questions you may have had. It may seem like quite a bit of effort to work these things out to start with, but as long as you can work it out, no matter how long it takes, that's the important thing.
So there I disagree, because if you want to learn this information, it's not going to be of any use if you have to work things out. You just have to memorize these things, or I always say learn them as sentences. That's the way you have to do it, because you have to work things out. Then it's just purely a theoretical exercise. Why are you doing that? In jazz, you have to play. There's no time to work things out. You have to take care of your timing. You have to take care of your lines. So you either need to memorize this stuff and know it cold, like you know the multiplication tables, or don't do it and just learn the stuff that you really need. Again, right? You don't need all of this stuff to have memorized to play jazz. Most of it, actually, that was said in this video, you don't really need.
As you get more and more familiar with scales and chords and progressions, this will all begin to come to you more naturally. So I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. As I mentioned at the start of this video, this lesson was actually taken from my brand new course, Jazz Basics, which has just been released inside the Piano Pig Academy. If you're not already a member and you want to get access to the full course, click the link in the description, come and join us, and I'll be waiting for you inside the community. I'll see you there.
Now, I think that was a very good video. The information was good, was accurate, well explained, well demonstrated. Good graphics. So, I mean, there's nothing to say about that. It's just like my view on harmony, as I've said in another video, is very simplified in a way. It's simplified in the way that I would only focus on stuff that you would actually need all the time, but then I would go deep on those subjects. So there's nothing wrong with this video. I like it. Go give it a like. Maybe check out some more videos. And I would think that if you would just take a jazz theory course, you would get all of this information in the same way. Maybe this is better because it's really nicely shown on screen. But even with those other jazz courses, even on university, I think a lot of time is spent on stuff that has really no real impact for your gigging life. It's the 20-80 rule, right? It's like 80%. No, what's it called? Like 20% of the stuff that you learn, you would use 80% of the time. So 80% of the stuff that you would learn, you would only use 20% of the time. But it takes so much time to work on that 80%, which you can only use 20% of the time. Is it really worth it? I would say no. And a very good example for that, for me personally, with violin, is that I've never really learned to play well in D flat, G flat, A flat, also a bit of a problem. I can still do A flat. But people sometimes ask me, like, why don't you work on it? Well, I will tell you why. I will tell you why. It's because I never play in D flat and G flat. I've never encountered any situation that I had to do that. And A flat is only maybe 2 tunes in Gypsy Jazz. One is called Symphony. Nobody plays that. And you can also play it in A. I think there's recordings in A. And the other tune is Donna Lee. If I have to play that, then I would always ask the rhythm section to play the violin solo in G. So now we just play the theme in A flat and then switch to G. And that works great. Actually sounds really good to do that. And the reason I do that is because in the key of G, I play 500 times better than the key of A flat. Why? Because I spend so much time getting good in G, right? I spend time getting good in G, in C, in D, in F, in B flat, in E flat, and then a bunch of minor keys. I just made a conscious choice not to spend any time on D flat and G flat and very little time on A flat, just because it's lower than a 5% chance that I have to play anything in those keys. And if that would ever happen, let's say they would want to play a D flat blues, then I would just sit out the tune. Right? I have one tune without violin, because I'm sure that the next tune will just be in D or something. That was it for this video. I hope it was useful. I think it was nice.